The detention cell hummed with the low vibration of the Galactic Council's flagship, its walls a sterile white that hurt Captain Sarah Chan's eyes. She flexed her wrists against the energy restraints, feeling the familiar burn of the quantum locks as they held her arms behind her back. The metal chair beneath her was uncomfortable by design, another small cruelty in what had become a parade of indignities. "Terrorist," spat Ambassador Cresty H., his scaled face twisted in disgust as he paced before her. The reptilian's forked tongue flicked out nervously, tasting her defiance in the air. "You humans are all the same. Violent. Unpredictable. Dangerous." Sarah kept her expression neutral despite the rage building in her chest. 3 days ago, she had been commanding the UES Defiance on a routine patrol near the Kepler sector. 3 days ago, she had 37 souls under her command, good people who trusted her to bring them home. Now those same people were listed as casualties in what the Galactic Council was calling an unprovoked human attack on a peaceful research station. "I've told you 100 times," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. "My ship detected massive energy signatures consistent with weapons testing. The station fired first. We defended ourselves." The reptilian's laugh was a harsh hissing sound that echoed off the cell walls. "Lies. Your species' default response to anything you don't understand. Violence first, questions later." Behind Cresty H stood 2 more council representatives. Tvara, an insectoid chitinous whose compound eyes never stopped moving, clicking her mandibles in what Sarah had learned was their equivalent of contempt. Beside her, the gaseous being known as Thoughtweaver floated in its containment suit, its form shifting colors from blue to deep purple as it studied Sarah with something approaching scientific curiosity. "The evidence is overwhelming," Tvara's voice buzzed through her translator. 37 humans dead. 17 council citizens dead. Your ship's weapons signatures match the blast patterns on the research station. The math is simple, even for a primitive species." Sarah's jaw tightened. Primitive. That word had followed humanity since they'd made first contact with the Galactic Council 15 years ago. Primitive because they solved problems with direct action instead of endless committee meetings. Primitive because they asked uncomfortable questions instead of accepting the status quo. Primitive because they dared to suggest that maybe, just maybe, the Council's way of doing things wasn't the only way. "The research station was conducting illegal weapons experiments," Sarah said, leaning forward as much as the restraints would allow. "My science officer detected quantum resonance patterns consistent with planet killer technology. When we attempted to investigate, they opened fire." Planet killer technology, Thoughtweaver's voice was like wind chimes in a hurricane, melodic but somehow wrong. Such paranoid thoughts. The station was studying harmless stellar phenomena. Your aggression turned a peaceful scientific endeavor into a massacre. Harmless? Sarah's voice rose despite her efforts to remain calm. My ship recorded massive gravitational distortions. Whatever they were building could destabilize an entire star system. Recorded, Trera clicked dismissively. Human technology. Unreliable. Probably fabricated. The casual dismissal hit Sarah like a physical blow. Everything humanity had achieved, every advancement they'd made, was always discounted by the Council as inferior or suspicious. They'd been members of the galactic community for over a decade, but they were still treated like children playing with dangerous toys. "Where is my crew?" Sarah demanded, changing tactics. "I want to see them. I want to know they're safe." "Your crew is being held pending investigation," Cresty H said, finally, stopping his pacing to loom over her chair. "Like you, they face charges of unprovoked aggression, destruction of Council property, and murder." "Murder?" The word exploded from Sarah's lips. "We defended ourselves. Your people fired first." "Lies," the reptilian hissed again. "Always lies with your species." Sarah closed her eyes, fighting back the wave of helplessness that threatened to overwhelm her. She thought of her crew, probably sitting in similar cells, facing similar accusations. Lieutenant Yamamoto, her first officer, barely 25 and looking at a lifetime in a Council prison. Chief Engineer Rodriguez, who had 3 kids back on Earth who would grow up wondering why Daddy never came home. Dr. Patel, whose only crime was serving as science officer on a human ship. The Judicial Committee will convene in 6 hours, Thoughtweaver announced, its form shifting to a sickly yellow. Your trial will be swift. The council has already determined your guilt. Trial? Sarah opened her eyes, staring at the alien beings before her. You mean sentencing? You've already decided we're guilty. The evidence is clear, Tvera buzzed. Humans attacked a peaceful research station. 17 beings are dead because of your species' violent nature. Justice will be served. And, what about the weapons research? What about the gravitational distortions my ship recorded? Are you just going to ignore that? Fabricated evidence, Cresty H said dismissively. Your kind is known for creating false data to justify your aggression. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. This wasn't about justice or truth. This was about fear. The Council had been looking for an excuse to put humanity in its place ever since they joined the galactic community, and now they had one. It didn't matter that the research station had been conducting illegal experiments. It didn't matter that they'd fired first. All that mattered was that humans had fought back instead of submitting quietly. Captain Shan, Dr. Patel's voice suddenly echoed through the cell's communication system. Sarah's head snapped up, hope flaring in her chest at the familiar sound. The good doctor wishes to confess, Tvera explained, her mandibles clicking in satisfaction. Finally, some truth from your species. But, when Dr. Patel's image appeared on the cell's display screen, Sarah saw something in her science officer's eyes that made her heart race. Not defeat. Not surrender. Something else entirely. Captain, Dr. Patel said carefully, I've reviewed all our sensor data from the incident. The readings were unusual. Sarah caught the subtle emphasis on the word unusual. It was a code word they developed during long missions, a way to communicate sensitive information without alerting potential listeners. In what way, Doctor? Sarah asked, playing along. The gravitational distortions we detected weren't random. They followed a specific pattern. Mathematical. Deliberate. Dr. Patel's eyes locked onto Sarah's through the screen. Someone was testing something that could rewrite the laws of physics on a cosmic scale. The 3 council representatives exchanged glances. Sarah saw something pass between them, a flicker of communication too quick for human eyes to follow. Enough, Cresty H snapped. Turn off the communication. The human spreads more lies. But, it was too late. Sarah had seen what she needed to see. Dr. Patel had discovered something important enough to risk coded communication during their interrogation. And, judging by the council representatives' reactions, it was something they very much wanted to keep secret. What aren't you telling me? Sarah demanded, struggling against her restraints. What was that station really doing? Peaceful research, Tvera insisted, but her compound eyes were darting nervously between her companions. Stellar observation, Thoughtweaver added, its form flickering rapidly through the color spectrum. Scientific advancement, Cresty H concluded, but his forked tongue was flicking out frantically now, tasting deception in the air. Sarah almost smiled. Almost. Because for the first time since this nightmare began, she had them on the defensive. Whatever the council was hiding, it was big enough to risk framing an entire human crew for mass murder. Big enough to throw away any pretense of justice or due process. You're scared, Sarah said quietly, and the 3 aliens went very still. You're scared of what we found. You're scared of what we might tell others. That's what this is really about. Silence, Cresty H roared, his composure finally cracking. You will be silent. But, Sarah was past caring about their threats. That's why the trial is a sham. That's why you won't listen to our evidence. You can't afford for the truth to come out. The reptilian's clawed hand moved toward the weapon at his belt, and, for a moment Sarah thought he might actually shoot her right there in the cell. But, Tvera's mandibles clicked rapidly, and he froze. Calm, the insectoid buzzed. Justice will be served through proper channels. Justice, Sarah repeated the word like a curse. You wouldn't know justice if it bit you on your scaled hide. 6 hours, Thoughtweaver said, its form now a deep, angry red. In 6 hours, you and your crew will face the consequences of your species' violent nature. The 3 council representatives filed out of the cell, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the humming of the ship's engines. But she wasn't afraid anymore. Angry, yes. Frustrated, absolutely. But not afraid. Because Dr. Patel had given her hope. Somewhere in the data they'd collected from that research station was proof of what had really happened. Proof that the council was hiding something so dangerous they were willing to commit judicial murder to keep it secret. Sarah flexed her wrists again, feeling the burn of the quantum restraints. 6 hours until the show trial. 6 hours to figure out how to expose the truth. 6 hours to save her crew and, possibly a lot more than that. The cell's lights dimmed automatically, the ship's computer adjusting for what it calculated as her sleep cycle. But Sarah wasn't planning on sleeping. She closed her eyes and began to think, replaying every moment of the incident, every reading her ship had taken, every word that had been spoken. Somewhere in those memories was the key to everything. And she was going to find it. The judicial chamber of the Galactic Council was a monument to bureaucratic grandeur, its curved walls rising nearly 100 meters overhead and lined with the symbols of 200 member species. Sarah Chen walked into the chamber flanked by 2 hulking brute-class security androids, their metallic footsteps echoing in the vast space like countdown timers. The quantum restraints around her wrists had been replaced with ceremonial shackles, a theatrical touch that wasn't lost on her. Above her, arranged in a perfect semicircle, sat the 9 members of the High Judicial Panel. Each species represented a different aspect of galactic civilization, from the ancient and wise ethereals who communicated only through thought projection, to the militaristic Cronians whose scarred exoskeletons told stories of 1,000 battles. At the center sat High Judge Veltar, a being so old that his species had forgotten their own homeworld's location. The accused will state her name for the record, announced the court's AI, its voice echoing from speakers hidden throughout the chamber. Captain Sarah Chan, United Earth Space Command, serial number 774 Alpha 992, Sarah replied, her voice carrying clearly in the acoustically perfect space. The charges, High Judge Veltar's voice was like rustling leaves, barely audible yet somehow filling the entire chamber. Unprovoked aggression against a council research facility. Destruction of council property valued at 14 billion standard credits. 34 counts of murder in the first degree. Sarah's jaw tightened. I entered a plea of not guilty 6 hours ago. That hasn't changed. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the assembled judges. To her left, she could see the viewing gallery where her crew sat under heavy guard. Lieutenant Yamamoto's face was stone, but she could see the fear in his young eyes. Chief Rodriguez looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. Only Dr. Patel seemed calm, her scientific mind no doubt still working on the puzzle they'd uncovered. The prosecution will present its evidence, Veltar continued, as if Sarah hadn't spoken at all. Ambassador Krestiach slithered forward to the center of the chamber floor, his ceremonial prosecutor's robes doing nothing to disguise his predatory nature. Behind him floated a holographic display showing the research station as it had been before the battle, a sleek, modern facility orbiting a brown dwarf star in the neutral zone. Honorable judges, Krestiach began, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the tension in the air. What you see before you was the Kepler Research Station, a beacon of scientific cooperation and peaceful exploration. 17 beings lost their lives when human aggression turned curiosity into catastrophe. The hologram shifted, showing Sarah's ship, the UES Defiance, approaching the station. To anyone watching, it looked routine enough. A standard patrol vessel conducting what appeared to be a normal scan. The human vessel approached without warning, without requesting permission to enter council space, and, without identifying their intentions, Krestiach continued. When the station's administrator attempted to establish communication, the humans responded with weapons fire. That's not what happened, Sarah said loudly, causing several of the judges to turn their attention to her.
The accused will remain silent unless asked to speak, rumbled Judge Kron, his battle-scarred carapace shifting as he leaned forward.
This is a court of law, not a battlefield. But Sarah was past caring about their rules and procedures.
You're showing them edited footage.
Where's the part where the station fired first?
Where's the sensor data showing the gravitational distortions? Silence.
Veltar's voice cracked like a whip, and Sarah felt something press against her mind, forcing her to step back. The old judge's mental abilities were legendary, and she could feel him trying to impose calm on her thoughts.
Cresty H smiled, a predatory expression that showed far too many teeth.
As you can see, honorable judges, the human displays her species' characteristic inability to accept responsibility for their actions. But the evidence speaks for itself.
The hologram changed again, showing the aftermath of the battle.
Debris floating in space, emergency pods scattering like frightened birds, the research station's hull breached in a dozen places. It was devastating, and Sarah felt a familiar pang of guilt at the destruction, even knowing they'd had no choice.
37 human deaths, Cresty H said solemnly. 17 council citizens dead.
All because one human captain decided that violence was the answer to a simple misunderstanding.
Misunderstanding? Sarah couldn't help herself.
They were building a weapon that could destabilize an entire star system. This time the mental pressure from Veltar was stronger, forcing her to her knees. Pain lanced through her skull as the ancient judge's thoughts pressed against her own. The human will be silenced if she cannot control herself, Veltar announced. This court will not tolerate disruption. Through the pain, Sarah saw something that made her heart race. In the viewing gallery, Dr. Patel was making subtle hand signals, spelling out letters in the sign language they'd learned during a mission to a deaf colony world.
CNSORDATA. The sensor data. Dr. Patel had found something in the sensor data. The prosecution presents Exhibit Alpha 7, Cresty H announced, and a new hologram appeared.
This one showed telemetry from Sarah's ship, indicating weapons lock and firing sequences. The human vessel achieved weapons lock on the research station at precisely 1400 hours, ship time. They fired without warning, without provocation, and without mercy. But something was wrong with the display. Sarah had been on the bridge during the entire encounter, and she remembered the sequence of events clearly. The station had fired first, their energy beams lancing out toward the Defiance before her weapons officer had even been given permission to return fire. Your Honors, Dr. Patel's voice suddenly rang out from the viewing gallery, causing every head in the chamber to turn.
I request permission to address the court.
The human scientist will be silent, Judge Tfera buzzed angrily. She is not on trial here. Actually, Dr. Patel continued, rising to her feet despite the restraints around her wrists, I am.
We all are.
And I have evidence that proves our innocence. The chamber erupted in chaos.
Guards moved toward Dr.
Patel while the judges conferred in rapid, overlapping conversations. Sarah felt the mental pressure from Veltar increase, but her science officer pressed on. The sensor logs you're showing the court have been altered, Dr. Patel announced, her voice carrying clearly over the commotion.
I can prove it. The quantum signatures don't match. Someone has been editing the data to hide what really happened. Remove the human, Judge Kron roared, his battle instincts clearly triggered by the accusation.
But, before the guards could reach her, Dr. Patel did something unexpected. She pulled a data chip from somewhere in her clothing and threw it toward the center of the chamber, where it skittered across the polished floor. Raw sensor data from our ship's black box, she called out as two guards grabbed her arms.
Unedited. Unaltered. The truth.
Sarah watched in amazement as chaos erupted throughout the chamber. Half the judges were demanding that Dr. Patel be removed immediately, while others were arguing that the evidence should be examined. In the viewing gallery, the rest of her crew was on their feet, shouting support for their science officer. Order! Veltar's mental pressure slammed down on everyone in the chamber like a physical weight, forcing them all back into their seats. There will be order in this court. The ancient judge's eyes fixed on the data chip lying in the center of the chamber floor. For a long moment, he stared at it as if it might explode. "The evidence will be examined," he announced finally, causing Cresty H to hiss in alarm. "Your Honor," the prosecutor protested, "this is clearly a fabrication.
Human technology is notoriously unreliable. The data has probably been altered to support their lies."
"Nevertheless, it will be examined," Veltar repeated, his tone brooking no argument. Sarah felt hope flare in her chest as a court technician scurried forward to retrieve the data chip. Maybe Dr. Patel had found something. Maybe there was still a chance to expose the truth. The technician inserted the chip into the court's main display system, and immediately the chamber filled with holographic representations of sensor data.
To most of the aliens present, it probably looked like meaningless human gibberish.
But Sarah could read it clearly, and what she saw made her blood run cold. The gravitational distortions were massive, far beyond anything that should have been possible with known technology. Whatever the research station had been building, it was operating on principles that violated several fundamental laws of physics. "As you can see," Dr. Patel called out from where the guards still held her, "our ship detected massive gravitational anomalies consistent with artificially generated spatial distortions. The energy readings suggest technology capable of manipulating the fabric of spacetime itself." "Lies," Cresty H snarled, but Sarah could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Furthermore," Dr. Patel continued, "the timestamp clearly shows that the station fired first.
Our weapons didn't come online until 3.7 seconds after their initial attack."
The holographic display shifted, showing the sequence of events in chronological order.
Sarah watched with growing satisfaction as the truth unfolded before the court. The station's weapons charging up.
The first energy beam lancing toward the Defiance.
Her ship's defensive systems coming online. The return fire that had ultimately destroyed the research facility. Fabricated, Trera clicked desperately. Human technology cannot be trusted.
"Actually," a new voice said from the back of the chamber, causing everyone to turn in surprise, "human sensor technology is some of the most accurate in the galaxy."
Sarah's heart nearly stopped as she recognized the voice.
Slowly, she turned to see a figure walking down the center aisle of the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence.
Admiral Marcus Webb, the highest-ranking human in the Galactic Council's military structure, strode into the chamber like he owned it.
His uniform was immaculate, his bearing confident, and his face set in an expression of barely controlled anger.
"Admiral," Veltar said, surprise evident even in his ancient voice. "This is irregular."
"So is conducting a show trial based on fabricated evidence," Webb replied calmly, stopping in the center of the chamber floor.
"Your Honors, I have additional evidence that I believe this court needs to see." Sarah watched as her crew's faces lit up with hope in the viewing gallery.
Webb was respected throughout the council, even by those who didn't trust humanity. If anyone could make them listen, it was him.
"The court recognizes Admiral Webb," Veltar announced after a moment of consideration. Webb nodded once, then activated a personal data projector.
The chamber filled with new holographic displays, these ones showing not just the battle, but events leading up to it. The research station was operating under false credentials, Webb announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. The project was not authorized by the Science Council, and the technology they were developing posed a direct threat to galactic security. "Impossible," Cresty H protested, but his voice was weaker now. "Furthermore," Webb continued, "my investigation has revealed that Captain Chen and her crew acted exactly as they were trained to act when faced with an unknown threat. They attempted communication. They offered assistance. They only fired when fired upon." The Admiral's eyes swept across the assembled judges, meeting each gaze in turn.
"The real question this court should be asking is not why humans defended themselves against an unprovoked attack.
The question is who authorized the construction of a weapon capable of destroying entire star systems, and why they thought they could frame an innocent crew to cover their tracks."
Sarah felt something shift in the chamber's atmosphere.
The judges were listening now, really listening. And, in the viewing gallery, her crew was sitting up straighter, hope replacing despair in their faces. But she could also see the fear in the eyes of some of the council representatives present. Webb had just accused someone in the galactic government of conspiracy and murder.
The implications were staggering.
Admiral, Veltar said carefully, you are making very serious accusations.
Yes, Webb replied simply. I am. Admiral Marcus Webb stood in the center of the judicial chamber like an island of calm in a sea of chaos.
Around him, the assembled judges whispered in a dozen different languages while council representatives gestured frantically at their communication devices. Sarah Chen watched from her position near the defendant's dock, hardly daring to breathe as the most powerful human in the galaxy prepared to either save her crew or destroy his own career. Admiral Webb, High Judge Veltar said carefully, his ancient voice carrying the weight of millennia, you understand that accusations of conspiracy against council members are not made lightly.
Do you have evidence to support these claims? Webb smiled, and Sarah recognized the expression from their academy days. It was the same look he'd worn when he was about to checkmate an opponent who thought they were winning. Your Honor, I have evidence that will fundamentally change how this court views not just this case, but humanity's place in the galactic community. He gestured, and his personal holographic projector filled the chamber with new displays. What you're looking at is a complete reconstruction of events leading up to the Kepler incident, compiled from multiple sources including deep space monitoring stations, quantum communication logs, and testimony from survivors. The first image showed the research station during construction, months before the battle. But this wasn't the peaceful scientific facility that Prosecutor Cresty H had described. This was a fortress, bristling with defensive systems and surrounded by automated weapons platforms. The Kepler Research Station was established 18 months ago under Science Council Authorization Number 77 Alpha Delta, Webb continued. However, when my investigators contacted the Science Council, they had no record of this authorization. The paperwork was fabricated. A ripple of shock ran through the chamber. In the viewing gallery, Sarah saw Dr. Patel lean forward with intense interest while the other crew members looked confused by the technical implications. Furthermore, Webb said, calling up new displays, the funding for this facility came not from the Science Council's budget, but from a classified military account controlled by the Strategic Defense Committee. This time the reaction was stronger. Several judges began conferring in urgent whispers while Ambassador Cresty H's scales visibly paled. Sarah didn't need to be an expert in galactic politics to understand that Webb had just implicated some very powerful people. Admiral, Judge Tvera clicked nervously, you're suggesting that members of the Strategic Defense Committee engaged in illegal weapons research. I'm not suggesting it, Webb replied flatly. I'm stating it as fact. The chamber fell silent except for the low hum of the ship's engines. Sarah could feel the weight of history pressing down on them all. This wasn't just about her crew anymore. This was about the balance of power in the galaxy itself. The weapon being developed at Kepler Station was designated Project Nullification, Webb continued, his voice carrying easily in the acoustic chamber. Its purpose was to create artificial gravitational wells capable of collapsing star systems. In simple terms, they were building a weapon that could destroy entire civilizations by turning their suns into black holes. The words hit the chamber like a physical force. Sarah heard gasps from species she didn't even know could make such sounds. In the judges' gallery, ancient beings who had lived through the formation of the galactic government sat in stunned silence. That's impossible, Judge Kron rumbled, but his voice lacked conviction. Such technology doesn't exist. It does now, Webb said grimly. Or rather, it did. The prototype was functional when Captain Chen's ship detected the gravitational distortions. The station's crew fired on the Defiance not to defend peaceful research, but to prevent the discovery of the most dangerous weapon in galactic history. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as the implications hit her. They hadn't stumbled onto a weapons test. They discovered something that could reshape the balance of power between species forever. Even if this is true, Cresty H said, his voice wavering but determined, it doesn't change the fact that humans fired on a council facility. They committed murder. Did they? Webb turned to face the prosecutor directly. Let me ask you something, Ambassador. If someone was pointing a gun at your family, and you shot them to protect your loved ones, would you call that murder? That's different, Cresty H protested. Is it? Webb's holographic display changed again, this time showing tactical analysis of the weapon's capabilities. According to our calculations, a fully operational nullification device could destroy Earth's sun from a range of 50 light-years. It could destroy any sun, anywhere in the galaxy, without warning and without defense.
The chamber erupted in chaos. Judges shouted over each other in a dozen languages while security guards moved nervously between the gallery sections. Sarah saw fear in alien faces that had probably never known what that emotion felt like. Order! Veltar's mental pressure slammed down on the chamber again, but even the ancient judge's legendary composure seemed shaken.
Admiral Webb, you're describing a weapon that could threaten every civilization in the galaxy.
Exactly, Webb said quietly. Which is why Captain Chan and her crew are not murderers. They're heroes. They discovered a conspiracy that could have led to the subjugation or destruction of every free world in known space, and they stopped it.
We don't know that the weapon would have been used against civilian populations, Tvera clicked weakly. Don't we? Webb's expression hardened. Let me show you something else.
The holographic display shifted to show communication logs, streams of encrypted data passing between the research station and various points throughout Council space.
These are the station's communication records from the week before the incident, Webb explained.
They were in contact with separatist groups in 17 different systems. Groups that had one thing in common: they wanted to break away from Council authority. Sarah felt the pieces clicking together in her mind.
This wasn't just about building a weapon. This was about revolution. The Strategic Defense Committee wasn't just developing the nullification device, Webb continued relentlessly.
They were planning to use it to enforce a new order. Any system that refused to submit to their authority would have their star destroyed as an example to others. You're describing genocide on an unimaginable scale, Judge Kron said, his battle-hardened voice barely above a whisper.
Yes, Webb agreed simply. I am.
The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah looked around the chamber and saw the same thought reflected in dozens of alien faces. This changed everything.
But there's more, Webb said, and Sarah wondered how much more shocking news the chamber could absorb. The conspiracy doesn't end with the Strategic Defense Committee. We've identified co-conspirators in the High Council itself.
This time the reaction was beyond chaos. Several judges rose from their seats while others began shouting demands for evidence. In the viewing gallery, her crew sat frozen with shock at the magnitude of what they'd uncovered. Admiral, Veltar's voice cut through the noise like a blade, you are accusing sitting members of the High Council of treason.
You understand the implications of such charges? I understand them perfectly, Webb replied. Which is why I've brought proof.
The holographic display changed one final time, showing a series of financial records and communication logs that Sarah couldn't begin to interpret. But, judging by the reactions of the judges, the evidence was damning.
Counselor Thexmar of the Inner Worlds Alliance, Webb announced.
Counselor Veldin of the Outer Rim Coalition. Counselor Zarthek of the Military Oversight Commission.
All three received payments totaling 14 billion credits in exchange for their authorization of project nullification.
The chamber fell completely silent. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat in the sudden quiet. 3 sitting high counselors, Veltar said slowly, engaged in conspiracy to commit genocide.
That appears to be the case, Your Honor, Webb confirmed. And, Captain Chen's crew stumbled into the middle of this conspiracy purely by accident?
They were doing their job, Webb said simply.
Protecting the peace. Investigating anomalies. Defending themselves when attacked.
Everything they did was exactly what we train our people to do. Sarah felt tears stinging her eyes as she watched her crew's faces in the gallery.
They'd been prepared to face execution for doing their duty. Instead, they'd been revealed as the people who'd saved the galaxy from tyranny. The court will recess for deliberation, Veltar announced. All charges against the human defendants are hereby suspended pending review of this new evidence.
As the judges filed out of the chamber, Sarah felt the quantum shackles around her wrists deactivate. For the first time in 3 days, she was free to move her hands.
Admiral, she said as Webb approached her position, I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me yet, Webb replied grimly. This is just the beginning.
When word of this gets out, there are going to be some very powerful people who want us all dead. Sarah looked around the chamber at the chaos of representatives and officials trying to process what they just learned.
So what do we do?
Webb smiled that same dangerous smile she remembered from their academy days. We do what humans do best, Captain.
We fight.
And we make sure the truth doesn't stay buried this time. In the viewing gallery, her crew was standing now, relief and pride visible on their faces. They'd started this ordeal as prisoners facing execution. They were ending it as the people who'd exposed the greatest conspiracy in galactic history.
But Sarah knew Webb was right. This was just the beginning. The real fight was about to start.